A woman and her son discovered her late husband's Cliffside home. What they found inside changed everything. He died before he could share the secret of the house he built, nestled deep in the mountains. Years later, his wife found letters meant for their son. Following a cryptic map, they embarked on a journey, climbing toward a place where his voice impossibly still lingered. Subscribe and tell us in the comments which city you're watching from. The wind carried a faint hum down the narrow street, where identical houses, their colors bleached by years of Oregon rain, seemed to sigh in unison. Mary Holden stood amidst a silent array of cardboard boxes in her living room, each a testament not to a fresh start, but to a quiet ending. The air hung thick with dust, subtly sweetened by the scent of aged wood. On the windowsill, a half-empty mug bore the faded, cracked red letters, "Firefighter's Wife." She'd considered discarding it countless times, but her hands always hesitated. Some things, like smoke, clung to you, persistent and unwilling to let go. The house had fallen silent since the divorce. The laughter that once filled the hallway was a ghost of memory, replaced by long nights punctuated only by the old wall clocks ticking and the restless shifts of her son, Eli, in his sleep. John Holden had vanished from their lives almost 2 years prior, first from their marriage, then from the world entirely. She still vividly recalled the day the sheriff arrived, hat in hand, bearing a silence more profound than any words. "Ma'am," he'd uttered, "I'm afraid there's been an accident." Those words had etched themselves into her very bones. He explained that John had fallen from a remote trail deep in the Idaho mountains. Alone. No witnesses. No answers. Mary hadn't shed a tear that day. Instead, her gaze had drifted past the officer to the maple tree in their yard, where John used to string Christmas lights, and she'd found herself fixated on how strange it was that something so towering could break so utterly without a sound. It was only much later that she realized she'd been holding her breath ever since, existing on shallow, cautious inhales, terrified to invite life back in. Eli, now 8, mirrored his father's quiet nature, yet retained a tenderness John had shed somewhere along his path. The boy spoke little these days, instead spending hours on the back porch with his sketchbook, filling pages with towering mountains, winding rivers, and precarious tiny houses perched on cliffs. When Mary once inquired why he favored such scenes, he'd replied, "Because they're hard to reach." She hadn't probed further. Children, she knew, bore their sorrows in their own unique ways. That morning, as she sealed the final box of old photographs, a knock echoed at the door. The postman stood, holding a small wooden package, wrapped in unassuming brown paper, her name scrolled across it in an unsteady, familiar hand. "Been at the post office a while," he offered. "No return address." Despite its lightness, the box sent a tremor through her heart. She carried it to the kitchen table, simply gazing at it for a long stretch. The paper was frayed, its corners softened by time. At last, she untied the string and lifted the lid. Within, nestled inside, lay a smaller wooden box bound with a leather strap. Carved into its top were the words, "For my boy when he's ready." Mary froze. Her fingers turned to ice. That handwriting. She would have recognized it anywhere. John. A gasp caught in her throat. The world seemed to shift, as if time had momentarily bent, allowing the past to bleed into the present. Inside the wooden box rested a stack of folded letters, bound by a thin rope. A faint scent of pine, smoke, and rain emanated from them, the very essence of every place John had sought peace. For hours Mary remained motionless at the table, her eyes fixed on the letters, too terrified to touch them, as if a breath too deep might make them vanish. When Eli returned from school, he spotted the box and approached it silently. "What's that?" he asked, his voice small, almost reverent. "Something from your dad," she whispered. The boy studied the letters for a long moment, then, without a hint of hesitation, untied the rope. He chose one at random and held it out. "Read it," he urged. The first letter was dated a year before John's death. His handwriting was neat, deliberate. "Hey buddy," it began. "If you're reading this, it means I couldn't give it to you myself. Don't be sad about that. Sometimes people don't get to finish their stories the way they plan. But I want you to know about a place I found, a piece of sky that touched the ground. There's a mountain out here, and on top of it I built something small. It's quiet. The kind of quiet that makes you remember you're alive. Someday when you and your mom are ready, go there. You'll know it when you see it. Mary slowly refolded the letter. Its simple words struck her like a wave breaking after a prolonged calm. She read the second, then the third. Each described fragments of the same remote location. A narrow valley, a river's bend, an old dirt road concealed beneath moss and branches. John wrote of a cliff where the wind feels like forgiveness and a panorama that makes you believe heaven might not be so far after all. For many nights, Mary found sleep elusive. She'd sit at the kitchen table long after Eli had gone to bed. The letter spread before her like an unfinished map she was too afraid to complete. Her mind replayed buried memories. The scent of smoke clinging to John's jacket, the tremor in his hands after grueling shifts, the distant look in his eyes when the sirens faded. He had saved strangers from burning buildings, but couldn't rescue himself from his own memories. When he left, she'd convinced herself it was an act of selfishness. Now, reading his words, she wondered if it had, in fact, been an act of survival. One evening, as she read another letter aloud, Eli leaned over her shoulder, pointing to the paper's edge. "That's a drawing," he observed. And it was. At the bottom of the page, a rough sketch depicted a mountain, a zigzagging line ascending its face, marked with an X at the summit. Beside it, John had penned, "When you come, follow the river until you hear it disappear. Then keep going." The following morning, Mary discovered a folded sheet tucked between two envelopes, a hand-drawn map. Though crude, it was legible, charting a series of landmarks, a crooked pine, a distinct bend in the road, a ridge resembling a sleeping bear. At its base, John's words read, "When you reach the silence, you'll find me." Mary sat in profound silence for a long time, the window's light illuminating the map. For the first time in years, something stirred within her. A feeling not of grief but of nascent purpose. That night, she informed Eli they were embarking on a journey. "Where?" he inquired. "Somewhere your father wanted you to see." They packed sparingly, 2 backpacks, a tent, and John's old field jacket, which still carried the faint scent of cedar and smoke. Before sunrise the next morning, Mary loaded their sparse belongings into the old truck, dormant since John's death. The engine sputtered and protested, but eventually roared to life, its sound reverberating through the hushed neighborhood. She cast a final glance at the house, its windows vacant and unwelcoming, devoid of any lingering warmth. Turning the key, she drove away, not once looking back. Their journey spanned 2 days. They traversed rivers and serpentine mountain roads, stopping at isolated gas stations where time seemed to have lingered for decades. Nights were spent in motels smelling faintly of dust and pine cleaner. Each evening, Eli would sit by the window, the map clutched in his hands, tracing their path with a hopeful finger. "Do you really think he built a house up there?" he once asked. "If anyone could," Mary replied softly, "it would have been your father." As they ventured further, the air seemed to thin, not from elevation, but from profound detachment. Civilization receded behind them, replaced by the rhythmic crunch of tires on gravel, and the wind's hushed whispers through the valleys. On the second afternoon, they entered a long, narrow canyon, the road clinging precariously to the edge of a river that gleamed like polished glass. Imposing cliffs soared on either side, their faces cloaked in vibrant green. It was a sight of breathtaking beauty, yet it also felt sacred, a realm untouched by the currents of time. As dusk began to settle, they reached a dead end where the road diminished into a dirt path. Ahead, a solitary ridge stood, less imposing than the surrounding mountains, but strikingly steep, its summit veiled in mist. Mary switched off the engine. A silence, profound and absolute, descended upon them. Eli climbed out, craning his neck to look up. "Is that it?" he breathed. Mary followed his gaze. The dwindling sunlight illuminated a verdant patch near the peak, a subtle hint of life against the unyielding stone. It appeared impossible, utterly unreachable. Yet an undeniable certainty bloomed in her chest. This was the place. They established a small camp near the ridge's base. The night air was sharper than Mary had anticipated. The river murmured below while above, the stars blazed with an intensity never seen back home. Mary sat by the fire, unfolding one last letter. John's words read, "When you come, don't rush. The road is steep but kind. Every step will take something from you. Fear, guilt, anger, and give you something in return. By the time you reach the top, you won't be the same. That's the point." The fire crackled, casting fleeting sparks into the profound darkness. Eli was already asleep in the tent, his small hand tightly clutching one of the letters. Mary gazed into the flickering flames, and for the first time since John's death, she allowed herself to envision him still present. Not physically, but in the essence of everything surrounding her. The river, the wind, the towering mountains. As the fire dwindled, she whispered into the night, "All right, John, we're here." And in the distance, a faint echo carried by the wind seemed almost to reply. Morning unfurled across the valley, slowly spilling light over the mist clinging to the river. The world awoke, painted in hues of silver and pale blue, the air redolent with damp earth and pine. Mary woke before Eli, the biting chill a welcome sensation on her cheeks as she emerged from the tent. The ridge, no longer shrouded in darkness, loomed above them. Now touched by daylight, it revealed a narrow path, a lazy curve carved by rain and the relentless passage of time. It didn't appear inviting, yet it felt imbued with a quiet life. She boiled water for tea on a small stove, watching the steam ascend, dissipating into the cold air. For a moment she stood motionless, listening. No traffic hummed, no voices carried. Only the river's ceaseless flow and the distant call of a high-soaring bird. This was a silence not of emptiness, but of awareness, as if the land itself held its breath in anticipation. When Eli emerged from the tent, hair tousled, eyes still heavy with sleep, she smiled. "Ready?" she asked. He nodded, clutching the folded map in his small hands. They left the tent behind, taking only essentials. A backpack with food, water, a blanket, and the letters. The path began gently, a gravel track half obscured by grass, clearly unused for years. As they walked, the sun climbed higher, dispelling the mist and revealing the world's intricate texture. Moss shimmering on rocks, ferns quivering with dew, the sudden flash of a lizard darting into the underbrush. The higher they ascended, the steeper the climb became. Soon the soft earth yielded to loose stone, each step sending faint echoes down the slope. Eli led the way, infused with the boundless energy of someone who had anticipated this moment his entire life. Every few minutes he'd pause, looking back to point out a peculiar rock, a cluster of red berries, or a bird circling high above. Mary followed in silence, her breath growing shorter, yet her determination remained steadfast. The rhythmic ascent had a peculiar effect on her. With each step, something inside her chest seemed to release, as if every inhale propelled a fragment of the past further away. Around midday, they reached a sharp turn where the trail broadened into a small clearing. The landscape unfolded, revealing the valley below in its immense vastness, the river a shimmering ribbon, the trees like swathes of green smoke, the road they'd traveled the previous night, now a mere forgotten thread. Mary sank onto a flat rock, wiping sweat from her forehead. Eli settled beside her, pulling the map from his pocket. "We're almost halfway," he declared, tracing his finger along the path. "See this curve here? It matches." His voice resonated with absolute certainty. She nodded, observing him. "You truly believe he made it up there, don't you?" He met her gaze with the quiet conviction only children possess. Of course he did. He said the road was kind. It wouldn't let him fall. Mary offered a faint smile, though her heart constricted at the echo of John's words. The road is kind. She hadn't believed it when she first read it. Life had taught her that paths, especially those unchosen, were rarely benevolent. But sitting there, feeling the wind's touch on her face, she realized kindness might not always equate to ease. Perhaps it signified forgiveness, the chance to persevere even when you felt utterly depleted. They resumed their ascent. The air thinned, the trees grew shorter, and the world sharpened, stripped of all superfluous distraction. At one point they discovered a wooden post driven into the earth, the letters JH deeply carved into its surface. Beneath it, half buried in the dirt, lay an old compass. Its glass was cracked, yet the needle still quivered faithfully towards north. Eli picked it up, brushing away the dirt with reverence. "He was here," he whispered. A surge of warmth and a pang of ache washed over Mary simultaneously. "Yes," she murmured softly. "He was." As they continued, more signs emerged. Small cairns of stones meticulously balanced, bits of rope tied to branches, and the cold remnants of a long-extinguished campfire. These subtle clues lent a rhythm to their journey, as if they were following a trail of breadcrumbs scattered years ago, guiding them toward a predestined discovery. After several hours they reached another plateau. The sun began its westward tilt, bathing everything in hues of honey and gold. They rested again, this time beside a fallen tree that served as a natural bench. Mary sipped water, leaned back and closed her eyes. Her body ached, but it was a satisfying ache, a visceral reminder of being alive. Eli broke the silence. "Mom, why did you and Dad stop liking each other?" The question was so abrupt she almost dropped her bottle. She turned to him, seeing not accusation, but simple, earnest curiosity in his face. "It's not that we stopped liking each other," she began slowly. "It's that we stopped understanding each other." He frowned. "How can that happen?" Mary gazed at the horizon, where the valley dissolved into a blue haze. "Your dad carried burdens he never spoke of, things from the fires, from the people he couldn't save. Changed him. And I kept trying to bring him back to who he was before. But he couldn't go back. He was somewhere else." She hesitated, her throat tightening. "And I didn't know how to follow." Eli remained quiet for a long moment. Then very softly he said, "Maybe he didn't want to go back. Maybe he just wanted you to see where he went." The final stretch of the path proved the most challenging. The trail dwindled, forcing them into single file, hands gripping rocks for precarious balance. The wind intensified, carrying the sharp scent of pine and impending rain. Yet, with each arduous step, they sensed their proximity. Finally, as the sun dipped low, they crested the ridge. There, nestled between two colossal stones, stood a modest wooden house. Not large or grand, it was merely a cabin of rough timber, its roof cloaked in moss, its windows obscured by dust. Yet it stood resolute, firm against the wind, as if patiently awaiting their arrival. Mary's breath hitched in her chest. Eli dashed forward, pausing at the door. "Mom," he exclaimed, "there's a garden." She followed him around the side. Indeed, a small, meticulously tended patch of land spread before them, rows of herbs, a few vegetables, wildflowers interspersed. The soil remained dark and soft, as if recently worked. Beyond the garden, a wooden bench overlooked the cliff's edge. From this vantage the view stretched boundlessly. The valley, the river, distant ridges dissolving into the fading light. Mary approached the door and gently pushed it open. It yielded with a soft creak. Inside, the air was cool, faintly redolent of ash and cedar. The room was sparse. A wooden bed, a table, a stove, shelves holding a few books and jars. Sunlight streamed through the window, illuminating an open notebook on the table. Dust motes danced above it like drifting memories. She stepped closer. The handwriting was unmistakably John's. With trembling fingers she traced the letters. "If she ever reads one of my letters, she'll understand. I didn't leave to disappear. I left to build something that could hold the silence." A single tear fell onto the page. She closed the notebook gently, her heart a complex blend of sorrow and peace. Eli moved through the small room with a quiet reverence, examining every detail. On a shelf, he discovered an old cassette player, identical to the one John kept in the garage. Taped to it was a note addressed to Mary. Mary's hands trembled as she pressed the play button. The machine crackled, then hissed to life. "Hey, Mare," John's voice, soft and deeply familiar, began. "If you're hearing this, then you made it. I knew you would. I wanted to explain, but I never found the words. I wasn't running away. I was just trying to remember how to breathe without the sound of alarms. This place, it's quiet. It listens. I hope someday you'd find it and see what I saw." Mary pressed a trembling hand to her mouth as his voice continued. "Tell Eli I love him. Tell him he doesn't need to be brave the way I was. He just needs to be kind. That's harder, but it lasts longer. And you, Mare, you were the one thing I never stopped missing." The tape clicked, and silence returned. Mary stood motionless, the wind's whisper now audible through the cabin's cracks. Eli wrapped his arms around her waist. "He's not gone, Mom," he murmured. "He's right here." She held him close, feeling the immense weight of years lift from her shoulders. Together, they stepped outside, settling onto the bench facing the boundless valley. The wind stirred gently through the garden, rustling the leaves. The setting sun's light bathed everything in amber and gold. For a long time neither spoke. The silence no longer felt oppressive. It was full, like the pregnant pause before a melody begins. Mary looked at her son. "He didn't run from us," she said quietly. "He was just trying to build something we could find." Eli leaned against her shoulder. "And we did," he affirmed. As the last light faded, the valley plunged into shadow. Yet high on the ridge, the world still glowed with the warmth of their discovery. Mary closed her eyes, feeling the wind caress her face. It no longer felt cold. It felt like breath, the kind that held both endings and beginnings in the same gentle exhale. The following morning dawned like a promise realized. When Mary opened her eyes, the cabin was awash in soft gold. The air cool and thin yet gentle. For a fleeting moment, she forgot her surroundings. Then the subtle sounds from outside, the steady cadence of her son's footsteps on the soil, the rustle of leaves in the garden, pulled memory back like sunlight breaking through clouds. She lay still, savoring a calm she hadn't known for years. It was a silence that filled rather than emptied, a profound stillness that reminded her she was, against all odds, still alive. Stepping outside, she saw the valley below shrouded in mist, glowing faintly in the nascent light. The garden teemed with life, its leaves dotted with dew that shimmered like scattered glass. Eli crouched by the plant rose, his hands already immersed in the dark earth. He looked up at her, a wide grin on his face, cheeks flushed from the cold. "Morning, Mom," he said. "I think these are still growing." She knelt beside him, brushing the tender, impossibly green leaves with her fingertips, vibrant despite the years that had surely passed since John last touched them. The soil was soft, rich. Whoever built this place had possessed a profound understanding of how to endure. They spent the early hours tending the garden, working in comfortable silence. Mary found tools in a wooden crate near the wall, rusted but still functional, and began trimming the overgrown edges. The rhythm of their hands moving through the soil, the scent of wet earth, and the wind's soft whisper through the trees made the world feel smaller, more intimate. She could almost sense John's presence, not as a haunting ghost, but as an integral part of the air itself. Upon returning to the cabin, the small stove had completely cooled. Mary lit it, the fire crackling softly, and set water to boil. As the flames grew, warmth pervaded the room, pushing back the persistent chill. Eli sat cross-legged on the floor, sorting through a small collection of items he'd found on the shelves. A pocket knife, an old family photograph, and a folded paper listing John's plantings: parsley, thyme, mint, lettuce. He looked at her. "He didn't just build a house, did he?" Mary slowly shook her head. "No," she said quietly. "He built a way to stay." They ate breakfast slowly, as if time itself had loosened its grip. The quiet enveloped them, sacred and profound. Afterward, Mary stepped outside, clutching one of the final letters she had brought, the only one addressed solely to her, not Eli. Her name was inscribed on the envelope in John's familiar steady hand. She hesitated, knowing whatever lay within would serve as the last bridge connecting them. The paper felt rough beneath her fingers. "Mare," it began. "If you're reading this, it means you found it. I wanted to tell you this place isn't about running away. It's about coming back to what matters. When I built the cabin, I kept thinking of that night you told me you were tired of living in my silence. You were right. I didn't know how to come home to you. Not in the way I should have. So, I built this, something that might speak for me when I couldn't anymore. If the world ever feels too loud, come here. Let it quiet you. Let it hold you. And if you stay long enough, maybe you'll hear what I couldn't say." Her hands trembled as she folded the letter back into its envelope. The unbearable ache that had once consumed her now softened into something distinct. Not quite forgiveness, but a profound understanding. The years they had lost could never be reclaimed. Yet standing there, encompassed by what he had constructed, she realized that some love doesn't vanish with absence. It transforms, discovering new ways to articulate itself. She found Eli sitting at the cliff's edge, his legs dangling into the vast emptiness below. The sun had climbed higher, revealing the valley in its full vivid splendor. A sea of green and silver, the river below shimmering like liquid glass. She sat beside him, feeling the breeze gently ruffle her hair. "You like it here," she murmured. He nodded. "It feels quiet but not lonely." She smiled. "That's exactly what your father wanted it to feel like." For a while they simply sat. Eli drew shapes in the dirt with a stick, While Mary let her gaze drift across the horizon, the world stretched endlessly, yet it didn't feel overwhelming. She thought of her years with John, the laughter that once echoed in their home, the dinners that dissolved into silence, the slow erosion of everything that had once been effortless. She recalled the night he left, how he'd stood in the doorway, hands trembling as if cradling something fragile. "I can't breathe here," he'd confessed. "I need to find a place where I can remember who I am." Back then she'd seen it as an excuse. Now she understood it as a heartfelt confession. Later, while tidying the shelves, she discovered another small wooden box tucked beneath the bed. Inside lay packets of seeds and a folded sheet of paper with the inscription, "Plant when ready." She smiled. The message wasn't solely for John. It was for anyone who would come after. She took the seeds outside, and together she and Eli dug small holes in the rich soil. The sun warmed their backs, the air thin yet wonderfully clear. They planted the seeds with meticulous care, one by one, pressing the earth over them as if sealing a sacred promise. When they finished, Eli looked up. "Can we come back here again?" he asked. She brushed the dirt from her hands and nodded. "Not just come back," she said softly. "We'll keep it alive." The words surprised her, but as they left her lips, they resonated with undeniable truth. This place wasn't merely a relic of the past. It was a beginning, cleverly disguised as an ending. They spent the afternoon exploring the ridge. On the far side of the cabin, they found a narrow trail leading to a small clearing filled with wildflowers. From there, their gaze could stretch even further, the river winding like a silver thread through the valley, disappearing into the distant horizon. The vista imparted a serenity that words could never fully convey. Eli lay on his back, staring up at the sky. "Do you think he can see us?" he wondered. Mary didn't answer immediately. She watched the clouds drift slowly across the blue expanse, then said, "I think he's part of everything that sees us." As the day began its gentle fade, they returned to the cabin. The light shifted from brilliant gold to deep amber to fiery orange, casting long shadows across the floor. Mary packed some things, but intentionally not all. She left the stove clean, the bed neatly made, the notebook closed on the table. Before locking the door, she placed John's final letter to her beside the cassette player. It felt profoundly right to leave it there, where the air still seemed to carry his voice. That night they chose not to sleep inside. Instead, they spread a blanket outside the cabin, lying beneath the boundless open sky. The stars blazed fiercely, unmarred by city lights. The wind carried the evocative scent of pine and smoke, and somewhere in the distance an owl called. Mary held Eli close, feeling the steady rhythm of his breath. He was warm, solid, alive. For years she had lived with the oppressive weight of loss pressing against her chest. Now, for the very first time, she felt an inner spaciousness again. A quiet, gentle expanse where something new could finally take root. At dawn, the horizon blushed a pale pink, and the first light kissed the cabin's mossy roof. Mary sat up, watching, her hands wrapped around a cup of tea. Eli was still asleep beside her, his head resting on her arm. She reflected on all the mornings in their old house, heavy with the sensation of an unspoken void. Here on this ridge where the world stretched wide and unbroken, she finally felt whole. When Eli stirred, she smiled, brushing his hair from his forehead. "Time to go, sweetheart," she said. He blinked, clearly reluctant to move. They packed their bags in quiet efficiency. Before departing, Mary walked to the cliff's edge one last time. The valley below was awakening, light diffusing through the trees like water through ancient roots. She drew a deep breath, the kind that fills you completely, right to the heart, and whispered, "Thank you, John." The descent proved easier than she'd anticipated. The path that had once seemed perilous and arduous now felt solid, familiar. Every turn, every stone held a memory of the climb, but also something new. A sense of returning, not merely departing. The air grew perceptibly warmer as they descended, and soon, the soft roar of the river became audible once more. Reaching the bottom, Eli looked back. The cabin was now a mere speck, framed by sunlight, almost ethereal. "It looks smaller from here," he observed. Mary smiled. "Things often do, once you've carried them inside you." They stood for a long moment, gazing at the ridge. The wind swept through the valley, carrying the mountain's essence, a blend of pine, earth, and something faintly sweet. It was the scent of peace. Mary placed a hand on Eli's shoulder. "Let's go home," she said. As they walked away, the sound of their footsteps faded into the river's whisper. The ridge stood silent behind them, the cabin hidden among the trees, its small garden patiently awaiting the seeds to sprout. For the first time in years, Mary felt no compulsion to look back. She knew the place would always exist, not just on a map or in the mountains, but in the quiet, expansive space within their hearts. By the time they reached the car, the sun was high, and the world ahead shimmered with light. Eli opened the door, still clutching the compass he'd found halfway up. It glinted in the sun, its needle steady, unwavering. Mary started the engine. The road stretched onward, winding through the valley, guiding them forward. As they drove, she contemplated how the world below the ridge would never appear the same again. It wasn't that the place itself had transformed, it was she who had changed. The silence she had feared for so long had morphed into something else entirely. Not emptiness, but sufficient space for life to move freely once more. And as the mountains receded in the rearview mirror, she whispered words not intended for John, but for herself. "You didn't leave me," she said. "You showed me how to stay." Above them, the sky broadened into an endless sweep of blue, the kind John had written about, where the earth seemed to kiss the heavens. Mary reached for Eli's hand, and he squeezed back gently. The road curved ahead, carrying them into the light. And for the first time in years, she didn't feel lost at all. If this story moved you, don't forget to subscribe for more. Watch the next one and share this video with someone who still believes that every place holds a secret.